Hey friends, it's Durosai here. Hope you all are doing well and staying creative. The topic of today's video will be mixing. Mixing's just one of those things that it's a little bit daunting at first, especially when you're starting to get into production, but like anything with practice, you'll get the hang of it. It's really about learning what to listen for and knowing what tools you can use to approach some of those issues. So I'll be showing you my process for how I approach mixdowns, just walking you through every element of the track, going through each plugin, showing what plugin I used and why I used them. By the way, did you know I have an Instagram where I post cool jam videos, all my music, and I share dope audio memes, so go follow me on there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that little notification bell, like the video if you actually do like the video. If you don't like the video, you could dislike the video, but I'd rather you not. And comment if you want to comment. Yeah. So now that I'm done with my spiel, let's get into the video. Alright, so I got the beanie, let's go. So this track is called Axis by my friend Teo-san. I did the mix down for this track. It's on our EP that we just released called Roadhead. So I'll put a link in the description below for that. Go peep it. It's cool, it's raw, it's deep, it's minimal. Yeah, it's cool, it's groovy. So I'll play a couple parts here and there, and then we'll start running through the track. Okay, so, normally if I'm mixing down my own track, I kind of just mix as I go, at least to get it to a point where it's listenable. And then when I'm pretty much done with the track, then I'll go in and button up the entire mix and get everything like super polished. So because this is not my track and I'm doing a mix down using stems, I can follow a little bit more of a systematic approach. So I do know people that do this for their own tracks where they'll bounce out all the stems into a new project file and just purely focus on the mix. You do whatever works for you. For me personally, I just kind of like mixing on the go. I just don't want the extra step of bouncing into a new project. But so the first thing I'll start with when I do approach a mix like this is just grouping all the tracks, making sure that all the like tracks are grouped together. So here I have a low frequency group with all just, this kick, bass line, got a drum bus, and within that I have a clap group, hat group, perks, synths, all this stuff. Got another group with vocals. The reason I do this is just to keep things organized and clean, and then, it's easy to just process things all at once when it's grouped. Keeps things nice and organized. The second thing I'll do is do a rough gain staging of all the tracks. Before I put any EQ, compression, any of that stuff, I'll just do levels. I'll set all the levels. And this is something that you will be sort of editing and fixing here and there as you mix down the track, but it's a good idea just to get that somewhat to a listenable level right off the bat. So to do that, obviously you use your utility or whatever, but I'll just have Voxengo on the master channel. Voxengo is just a spectrum analyzer. Actually, I have it right here. And this will allow me just to see what levels everything's hitting. So I have sort of a rough knowledge of where the kick should be in the hats and the mid-range, just based off of sort of my style of listening and also, or my style of music, and just through mixing tracks over the years. It's it's definitely a good idea to use a reference for this if you want as well. You can have a reference track and just compare the levels of that track with what you have, and try to compare the relative levels, because obviously a fully mastered track is going to be way louder. So I would just see like the relationship between the low frequencies, the highs, the mids, all that stuff. Okay, so now I'll just go through each individual track. So first, we got the kick. It was a little bit out of key, so I used a frequency shifter just to bump it down 3 hertz. There's a very minor change. And then put that into some drum bus, very light, just a very light drive and crunch, about 44% dry wet. Here we go into an EQ where I'm just cutting out the very low frequencies, anything below pretty much 20 hertz. I'm doing then a low mid cut, so let's listen to this kick as well. So right here, just doing a low mid cut. I always do this for my kicks. I think it just makes it sound a little bit tighter and cleaner, not as muddy. Boxango, that's just to analyze the levels. And then lastly, it's going into some R compressor. Just, you don't want the attack to be too short, otherwise you're going to squash the transient of your kick, which is most of the time a bad thing. But maybe if that's what you want to do, then go ahead and make the attack short. But you don't want to overly compress something and just lose the life out of the kick. So next, I duplicated that into a ghost kick track. And this ghost kick track, I'm delaying by -10 milliseconds. And this is just so that anything that I'm sidechaining to the kick will be sidechained to a signal that is playing very slightly before the kick. This is just so that the compressor has a little bit of time to react to the kick, and overall you're going to get a much cleaner sidechain, especially when using it with your bass line. So next we have the bass line. So for that I'm doing this low cut as well right here, down at 30 hertz, and another tiny low mid cut just to clean it up, make it a little bit less muddy. Let's listen to this. It's a minute change, but it's just cleans it up just a little bit. Then I have Fabfilter Pro Mb. I've been using this a lot lately for my multiband compression. So what I'm doing here is just taming some of these sub frequencies. So right here, it's it's very light, it's about 1 dB of compression, but it was a little bit boomy. So if I take this off, it was just a little bit louder than I wanted it. So I wanted to tame just the very low end without affecting the sort of mid bass that you're hearing, that funky mid bass. And of course that's going into drum bus just to fatten that up a little bit. And then sidechaining that to the ghost kick. And of course remember to keep your ghost kick turned off, otherwise it'll be a kick and not a ghost. You can't see ghosts. So next we have the drums, and I have the whole drum bus going into drum bus. You can never have enough of this. Got just about 20% wetness. I almost never like turning up the drive and the crunch for drum bus on my drums. I just think it sounds a little bit too distorted for my taste. But here's without it. It's just beefing up the drums a little bit. And then I have that going into a glue compressor, doing about 2-3 dB of compression. Sometimes I'll have it do a little bit more, maybe around 5, but I didn't think this track needed that much compression. And so I have that going with a slow attack, quick release. Personally, I almost never use a ratio outside of 4 on this Cytomic glue compressor. I don't really like the way 2 or 10 sound. That's just personally. Just adding a little bit of makeup gain to make up for the fact that I'm compressing about 3 dB. And then I'm parallel processing that, so you're getting 43% of this wet signal and 57% of the dry signal. When it comes to the claps, there are two in here that are being layered. There is this sort of long clap, and there's this sort of short staccato clap. There's no processing on these individual clap tracks, but there is processing on the clap bus. So I've grouped these together. And we just have a low cut here, taking out all that low energy, everything below 450 hertz. Got that going through our comp. This is just to make it a little bit snappier. So to do that, I have a slower attack, relatively quick release. Then I got that going into another compressor. This compressor is just kind of taming that initial transient just a little bit so it can fit in the mix a little bit better. What I was noticing is that when the clap plays, it's playing most of the time with the kick. So when that's happening, it was really activating the master it was really activating the limiter on the master channel. So in order to tame that, I had to use this compressor as well as this limiter, this color limiter from Max for Live right here. If you go into Max Audio Effects, you got color limiter. And yeah, it's just doing about a dB of limiting. So I always like to mix with my limiter on, just so I know if any part of my track is going to trigger that limiter a lot more than it really should be. So the biggest culprit of this, from my experience, is the clap, because one, the clap is usually loud, the clap and snare, and it's when you're have this sort of boots and cats drum style, the clap falls on the kick. So when those two are playing at the same time, it tends to really drive into the limiter. So for that, I needed these two compression stages. And that's just going into some room reverb, valhalla. Moving on, we got some hats. Yeah, on the hat bus itself, just a low cut at 75. So here we have these hats, which are not playing. There we go. Nothing crazy here, just taking out some of the lows, doing a very broad sweep on the high frequencies to make it a slightly brighter. I have this compressor here with a short attack just to take care of some of the really loud transients that are coming in. So if you can see, some of these are spiking a little bit hard, so I'm just compressing that. Then we got that going into Fabfilter Pro Mb. So I'm doing multiband compression just on this 5 kilohertz frequency that's spiking up here. So that range in general tends to be fairly harsh on the ear. So I just wanted to compress that. It's not doing a whole lot of compression, just about 1 dB, 2 dB-ish. And then that's going into another compressor. I like to split my I like to split my compressing stages. So it's, rather than having one compressor that's doing a lot of compression, I like to split it among a couple different compressors that are each doing a little bit of compression. That way there's no one compressor that's working super hard to attenuate that sound. So personally I think you get a little bit of a cleaner mix when you do that, and a more natural sounding compression. So that I am sidechaining to the ghost kick, panning that a little bit to the right. And this is just reverb right here. This channel is turned off. So yep, got that going to that same Valhalla reverb. So next we have these hats. Just an open hi-hat. So for that, doing again the low cut, cutting out some of this super high 12 kilohertz like harshness. And then I have to compress that transient again, so pretty short attack. Yeah, just taking the bite off. That I have a short release as well for that, because I don't want to compress too much of the tail of the hat, just that initial transient. And then here I have a compressor with a long attack, and this is just so I can make this the hi-hat a little bit sort of snappy. And then I have a gate. I forgot why. There must have been some noise or something. Oh right, so there was I totally forgot about this. There was a reverb on this hat, and it was just making the mix a little bit too muddy. It was like some built-in reverb, so I put a gate on it. So now we took out that reverb, and then I'm adding that back in with some reverb that I can control. So this is a short reverb. The reverb that was built in was pretty long. Yeah, it was just making everything muddy. And so this was a lot, it allowed it to fit in the mix way better. So then I'm also sidechaining this to the ghost kick right here. You know, none of these hats are actually playing on the kick, but the reason I'm sidechaining it is because when you have that sort of like with that upbeat, that little skitter hi-hat, when you add the sidechain, it has a nice little pumping effect, so I think it kind of breathes a little bit better, which I don't even know if what I said made any sense, to be honest. So now I'm taking that hat and panning it to the left. So these hats up here, I pan to the right, and this I'm panning to the left, so I'm giving them some physical space in the mix. You know, a couple different ways you can make things stand out, or at least, stand out in your mix, is by either giving them physical space, or you can have them playing in different frequency ranges, stuff like that. These are ways to have sounds that you can really differentiate in your mix, and it doesn't sound like just like one blob of sound. Got some zaps, which nothing really crazy happening here, just a little bit of EQ. Yeah, it's a zap. What do you want me to say? Now I got some perks here. And then I'm doing some multiband compression on here. Just cutting out some of these low mid frequencies, which low mids just tend to sound muddy. So if I turn this off, it's just a little bit too, it just sounds muddy. But I didn't want to use a high pass filter because then it sounds too thin. So I think a multiband was a good solution for something like this. And there's also these really sharp high frequencies that I need to take out. Yeah, that was just like way too harsh. So I'm taming that. And then I'm using this compressor to also tame that transient, just remove some of the initial bite, so it's not activating the glue compressor or the limiter too much. All these little stages of compression really add up. So when you have, just tiny bits of compression on every channel, I don't like to go too hard on compression. I like just a few dB if possible. Sometimes you might need more, but when you have that at the mastering stage or even at the final drum bus stage, you don't have to do too much compression because you're already doing a little bit of compression along the way. So here we got some more perks, and there's actually literally nothing on here, no EQ, just utility to do some volume automation, which let's see what it's doing. Yeah, so right before the drop, doing a little bit of volume automation, and that's it. Next we have some synths. So we have a thing here called mid waves. Sounds very liquidy. So I have this EQ here, just cutting out everything below 100. This synth took a little bit to fit in the mix, and I'll show you why. So I'm boosting this 1 kilohertz thing. So let me actually just take out everything I have going on here. I'll leave the reverb on. So yeah, very low mid heavy. So I'm cutting the very lows out first, boosting 1K so we get some of the nice warmth in the mid frequencies. Then I have a multiband compression, which is targeting this 160 hertz region. Again, that's where the mud is, so it's doing quite a bit of compression there. Then we have another high pass filter. Now this compressor, which is just taking care of the peaks, some very light compression. And that's being sidechained to the ghost kick. It's also being sidechained to this pad stab right here. So I'll play, that's this. So every time that plays, this is being sidechained to that. And that's just because they occupy a very similar frequency range. They're also located pretty similarly in the sort of spatial domain of the mix. Pretty center because they are the lead synths. And yeah, this just helps it get it out of the way. So then we have another layer of Fabfilter Pro Mb doing, I actually forgot what this is doing. What is this doing? I think this is actually side chaining. Where's my fucking thing? There we go. Yeah, so this is being side chained to the bass line. Let me play the bass line with it too. So the bass line has this really nice, rich warmth down at these sort of upper mid-bass frequencies. It's like 120 to 200, around that range. So I didn't want to lose that when you heard this synth. So for that, I am sidechaining it to there. Where is it? Yeah, so I'm sidechaining just that region, about 200 hertz, to the bass line itself. So just on Fabfilter Mb, you can sidechain just by coming down here, selecting your sidechain source material, and then here you just do external. And then I am sidechaining that again, this time the full signal. I'm sidechaining that to the bass line once more. So I'm splitting this up because I didn't want to sidechain the entire signal by like 6 dB, like what I'm doing here. Or I guess, yeah, like 6 dB. But I still wanted a little bit of sidechain, so I just split it up. So I'm sidechaining the target frequency by quite a lot, doing some heavy compression there. And then here, the whole broadband signal, I'm compressing that just a little bit. And then I have that going through reverb. So when I really like to utilize sidechain in a way that allows things to breathe. I mean, not just me, a lot of mix engineers out there. Sidechain is definitely your friend. And it's just nice when, you have two things playing in the same frequency range and you need to just move one out of the way temporarily. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here. Next we got this analog synth stab here. This is also very low mid heavy, so that's why I have a high pass filter. I also have this shelf here, so I'm shelving down this sort of below 250 range. But I like that high frequency thing that's going on there when it kind of decays. So for that I have a high shelf at 1 kilohertz. So everything above 1K is being boosted by about 6 dB. Then I got this multiband that's very heavily compressing that low mid region. If you can't tell already, low mids are not my friend. I don't like them. So that's being sidechained to the kick. Got a utility on here that's doing just volume automation. Then this EQ has a high cut and taking out some more, like, these aren't, I guess, low mids, these are mids, but there's a little resonance here that I'm notching out. And of course that's going into the reverb. So now, what do we got? Oh yeah, turn that off. Got this thing. Just some hiss. I have no processing on there. I'm keeping that low end in because I like that. So then we got this background noise here, which is like some ambiance. Sounds like some people at a diner or something. So I have a high pass filter here at 360 Hertz. There's a lot of low frequency energy here. Didn't want all that. Just wanted the top end. So I have this compressor here because this ambiance was a very dynamic signal. So like there was plates clinking, all of a sudden people would start talking really loudly and stuff. So I didn't want the volume to change a whole lot. I want it to be very steady, just so it can be a background noise and you wouldn't really notice it. So that's why I'm pretty heavily compressing it there. Got that going into multiband just to compress the low mids, or the mids, and like everything below it. That's being sidechained to the kick, and it's also being sidechained to the analog pad stab up here. Now we're getting to the bottom of the list. So we got a vocal, not using, those are turned off, so those aren't being used. So we have this vocal, there we go. So all that's going on here, a little bit of volume automation. Yeah, just high pass, low mid cut, and some ableton echo. And that's it. Yeah, not too much processing on this vocal. Nothing on that track. Got some bleps. So for this, again, high pass filter, just shelving a little bit of those high frequencies, things above about 4K. I have another Fabfilter Pro Mb cutting out the low mids and everything below it. Pretty much like everything has a low mid like fab filter. It's crazy. And that's just going into some long, very nice hull Valhalla reverb. Then we got some bubbles. Who doesn't like bubbles? Not too much processing here, just high pass filter, a little bit of EQ, compression, volume automation, and some reverb. Then we got this moog that's playing right before the drop. It's right here. Just a very bassy sound. It was like very hard panned to the right, so I just reduced the width just a tiny bit. It's also a little bit of Fabfilter Pro Mb, taming some of the sub frequencies. The sub was in the middle, but that high frequency was off to the right. So instead of like panning it, I just reduced the width. And that's being sidechained to the ghost kick. Lastly, we have a sigh, and there's no processing on there. Didn't feel like it needed any. Yep. So there you have it. That is the breakdown for the mix of this track Axis. Hope you found this video helpful. leave a like if you did, comment if you want to see some other stuff like this. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, stay safe, and stay creative. Bye.